Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just wrapped up a high-level summit this week. The leaders of Canada, the United States, and Mexico met in Mexico City to discuss a wide array of issues. Top of mind, continental planning for the economy of the future. That's renewables, semiconductors, high-tech, and advanced manufacturing. Now, to support all of it, an integrated and protected North American supply chain. In many ways, Washington is leading on this project, but how can Canada ensure it is an equal partner? David Cohen is the U.S. Ambassador to Canada. Ambassador Cohen, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start, if I could, at the high-level economic discussion that we saw at this summit about supply chain resiliency and continental interconnectedness on things like critical minerals and semiconductors. We've seen some protectionism from the president through things like the Buy American policy. So how can you reassure Canada and Mexico that they're equal partners in this, and in this transition won't have to overcome protectionist attempts by your government?
So I always am happy to entertain that question, but it gives me a chance to give a little economics 101 answer, which is that Buy America, Buy American policies are not protectionism, and they don't even apply to the overall economy. They relate to federal government procurement only. So, for example, a relationship between the government and the private sector for a mining interest for a critical mineral would not be subject to Buy America or Buy American because it's not federal procurement. So you have to distinguish. Those words get thrown around a lot in the same sentence. You have to distinguish. But most important thing is that I think what the North America Leaders Summit determined, what the nature of the conversation was the extensive interconnection and complementary nature of the economies of all three countries, but particularly of the United States and Canada. And the president laid out in real detail in the bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau how those old concerns about Buy America, Buy American almost didn't have a relevance, because with the work that was going to be done under the Inflation Recovery Act, the incentives that the United States was putting in place, for example, let's say to stimulate semiconductor manufacturing in the United States, was going to have a significant positive impact on the Canadian and Mexican economies, because those semiconductors were going to go into manufacturing operations that exist in Canada and in Mexico. And the Prime Minister made the explicit point that the largest semiconductor assembly,
the packaging
plant in North America is in Quebec. And so the more semiconductors that are produced as a result of the incentives for semiconductor manufacturing in the United States, the better it is for Canada.
So how do you see this looking? Because I know there is going to be a semiconductor summit that the president announced of industry and cabinet level officials to map out critical minerals and sort of build this industry. Do you see this looking almost like the auto sector looks right now, with cross-border shipment of goods and services and the value chain being truly continental when this transition is complete?
I think that's the goal, and that's why the president suggested this, because this is a place, remember, in our national security strategy, which was released 6 months ago, there is the prescient comment that the most important regional relationship in the world for the United States is the Western Hemisphere. And this is an opportunity to try to proactively make sure that the United States, Canada, and Mexico are working together in this space and are advancing the economies of all three countries and generating jobs and assembling a true integrated supply chain that benefits all three countries. That's the goal.
How do you envision the advanced manufacturing and processing, for example, of the critical minerals playing out in that? Because you can imagine the concern in Canada is a lot of critical minerals that the ore could just be scooped out and sent to U.S. refineries and U.S. plants. I mean, do you see an advanced manufacturing capacity on both sides of the border?
So the critical minerals to me is one of the most interesting elements of the relationship between Canada and the United States now, because yes, Canada has the critical minerals in the ground, but Canada needs the financing, maybe some of the technological expertise in the United States, needs the private sector engagement. And so this is why we need a high-level group, a coordinated effort to be able to figure out how continentally, or at least between Canada and the United States, we take advantage of critical minerals, and that is going to require all of us to work together and to make sure that there is full sharing of opportunity and the creation of a robust, integrated supply chain. So I can't answer you what it's going to look like, but I can say that Canada has made quite clear in every conversation I've had that their interest is in more than just supplying the critical minerals. They're not really interested, although there'll be a lot of economic activity, a lot of jobs, a lot of value to indigenous peoples from having a rational process for the extraction of the critical minerals, but there is a strong interest in Canada in making sure that they pursue critical mineral engagement right down the supply chain.
You mentioned, though, that Canada is going to need that funding. It's going to need the capital input to make a lot of this happen. And there's a competitive disadvantage right now between the two countries because of the measures in your Inflation Recovery Act. So Canada needs to up its game to some degree on that side to ensure that the processing facilities aren't built south of the border.
Yeah, I think the Inflation Recovery Act, I think the Inflation Recovery Act is one of the most important pieces of environmental legislation that's ever been passed in the world, certainly in the United States. And I think it would be a mistake to focus on the competitive risks to Canada or any other country as a result of the Inflation Recovery Act. There are a lot of opportunities for Canada and Canadian businesses to benefit from the incentives in the Inflation Recovery Act.
But the Finance Department did flag it as a competitive challenge in the fiscal statement.
And by the way, I think that's appropriate, and I don't think it's a bad thing for the United States to set a standard and to try and stimulate our friends and our allies to work on incentives and incentive structures that work for their countries. It doesn't have to be the same as what's in the Inflation Recovery Act. The idea is that I think that the Inflation Reduction Act has stimulated some thought, stimulated some thinking about, maybe Canada does need to get into the incentive business in a place where it hasn't historically been in the incentive business. And the net result of this is going to be increased economic activity and jobs in Canada as well as the United States.
I'd like to touch on Haiti if I could. I know the President and the Prime Minister discussed this in their bilateral. There were some suggestions based on the comments that Jake Sullivan made in the run-up to this bilateral that perhaps the U.S. was looking for Canada to lead the security response in Haiti. Is that an explicit request the President made of Canada in this conversation? Is that an outstanding request the U.S. has on the table?
So the shortest answer to that is not really. But let me take a step back and say that Canada and the United States have this extraordinary relationship. And we talk about everything that is important to the two countries all the time. But we're not in the business of pressuring Canada to do things or of making requests of Canada. They're conversations. And there have been conversations between Canada and the United States and our friends and allies in the UN Security Council about how to deal with the situation in Haiti, which is very disturbing, potentially unstable, something that is is meriting a great amount of attention in both Canada and the United States. And what the President and Prime Minister discussed and agreed to is a need to continue cooperating and working together and with other friends and allies in the UN Security Council to have a plan for dealing with the instability that exists in Haiti, and that at the end of the day, we want to end up being on the same page and knowing what we want to do and how to do it, all at the request of and in the interests of the Haitian people and what the Haitian people need and what they're asking for us for assistance. That was the nature of the discussion.
But have you had conversations about Canadian boots on the ground taking sort of operational control or a leadership role in the security response there as a request for Canada?
There's been next to no discussion about Canadian boots on the ground. It's not the nature of the discussion. Before the NALs, there have been thematic discussions about a potential leadership role for Canada to play in an international effort to support institutions in Haiti, particularly the Haitian National Police, Again, all at the request of Haiti and all in the interest of the Haitian people.
Okay. Ambassador Cohen, thanks for coming in. It was good to meet you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the air, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Great. Thanks, sir.
Good. Thanks.